dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again. I believe that we will win. Through the sweat and the fire within, we rise up when the skies grow dim. I believe that we will win. Mud on our boots, steel in our veins. Feel the heartbeat driving through the pain. Field of battle under shining lights. Every tackle a vow to this fight. I believe that we will win. Push through the noise, drown out the din. No giving up, we dig right in. I believe that we will win. Out on the edge where the brave won't break. With every fall, we've got hearts that ache. But we're not done, we're just starting the run. This is the song to the iron in the sun. Shouts from the stands echo.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Stateside Footy. It is Monday. God damn it, it's April 13, 2026, and I think we're less than 100 days away now, Jeff. I think we're less than 100 days now as we are kicking on our coverage as we get close to World Cup 2026. And joining me back on the pod is a good friend of mine, man. It's Big Jeff from Prost International, where he does very good stuff with the Seattle Reign, the Seattle Sounders, and of course the U.S. women's national team. But he's also no stranger to the U.S. senior men's national team. Of course, it's Jeff Lageson. Jeff, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty good. Probably better than Poach is doing, but right
I
now,
think Poach is doing all right, man. I think he's doing all right.
just coming out of that last window, that was a little snarky, but it's got to be a tough thing right now coming out of that important of a window looking that rough. It's a tough place to be right now for him, I think.
I didn't read too much into it because if this was the World Cup warm-ups against I think it's like what, Ghana and Germany,
I think there's Senegal in there or something.
or Senegal, it's like Senegal or Germany. It would be a little bit different because I don't think there's probably not going to be minutes restrictions on some of our best players. Again, this is a friendly international window. And when Johnny takes off after the first 45, I would probably assume that was by design. Was he injured? Was he not injured? Christian was on a little bit of on a minutes restriction a little bit there. Same thing with Flo Balogun. When you look at their club teams and you look at where they're at in the standings, most of these teams are playing for Champions League for next year. So obviously, most of these club coaches are looking at this like, we can't necessarily risk injury. We're not saying they can't go, but if you can do us a solid, and we're going to try to make sure that they're available in the summer. So if you take care of us, we'll make sure we take care of you type situation. And that's the read that I got off that March camp. On top of the fact that, quite honestly, I don't think they were ready for either team, considering the landscape that we're in. We're now post Nations League, where all our international windows for a good chunk of the year now are against CONCACAF opposition, which does not remotely set you up to come into that type of environment against two very good European teams, right? Like, say what you will about CONCACAF, but the fact that this team doesn't travel anymore, and the fact that for the most part we're playing subpar CONCACAF competition, it doesn't get you ready for Belgium or Portugal.
Yeah, and the time of season is a factor in all that, but it still didn't feel good to watch that. Like, there's still just part of that we should be building momentum, and it didn't feel like it was giving us that. And that's troubling. Yeah. But at the same time, like you said, restrictions and time of season matters. How they look against Senegal will be far more important. You look back over time, those last pre-World Cup matches, you go way back. 30 years ago, they played Kuwait right before going over to France. They didn't look good, and they weren't. They play Mexico right before World Cup and one, play in a Rose Bowl. It's a great game, and that group gets out of the group. The team that's there needs to have some momentum on it. But I think from a fan morale standpoint, the supporters need something to have a reason to believe that we will win. And I'm not sure that left that kind of a taste in the mouth of people, given how close we are under 100 days. So I'm still in that waffling mode, like when we talked last fall, where it's like, I want to believe, give me a reason to believe, but I'm struggling still.
Well, I maybe I'm on the little bit of the more of the belief side, because these guys are seasoned professionals now. And, like when you talk about Christian and you talk about Wes, I don't think you have to tell them how important this World Cup is. And I guess in some context, and we've seen this over the course of the last 5 years, previously under Greg Berhalter, where maybe they have taken certain windows off mentally, but when it came to certain tournaments, they were able to show up and actually perform well. And so I guess from that standpoint, maybe that has me a little bit more hopeful for the World Cup. But that being said, I just didn't read too much into it. And one of the things that I actually came out of this March window was the fact that, maybe we actually found a little bit of an explanation at that left center back position, because Austin Trusty played pretty goddamn well in that Portugal match. And there were a few individual performances coming out of both of those losses where you're kind of looking at it kind of like, okay, maybe this wasn't all that bad.
Yeah, I mean, and you can grab those pieces, and friendly windows are about pieces, maybe less than big picture, and everything. But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I really do want to see how they play against Senegal. I really do think that even with Turkey now having that third spot, which toughens their group a little bit, I do think that the opportunity to advance is still in front of them.
Without a doubt.
They have to go out and grab a point with Turkey, which I think they can do. They have to be able to beat Australia. Those two things happen, they get out of the group regardless of what happens. And so the Paraguay game, I think, is the real trick. Turkey's tough, but Paraguay, coming out of CONMEBOL and that situation right now, has the potential to be the team that just sort of shows up and really takes it at you. And so that's the team that I think has to be favored in the group. So.
Yeah, and and for all those U.S. men's national team fans that are looking at Australia as like a cakewalk, I think people forget that in 2022, Australia advanced out of their group and actually took, I think it was Argentina. They took Argentina to the brink and nearly pulled that one off. So, I look at all three of those as potential banana skins for the U.S. men's national team. If they're not on their P's and Q's, this thing could potentially get ugly. But before we get into tonight's conversation, Jeff, I do want to let everybody know that to make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any upcoming stateside footy content. And of course, Jeff is with us tonight. Tomorrow is USMNT Yanks abroad as we recap the week that was for the U.S. men's national team pool players playing in Europe. And that sets the tone for this upcoming weekend, which is obviously going to have the MLS live stream. Last week, it was Miami versus the New York Red Bulls, which was a fantastic 2-2 draw. And hopefully we'll get back to the Sounders this weekend. We'll see. I got to check the schedule.
Well, Wednesday night they've got.
Oh, that's right. They're playing on Wednesday. That's right. You're right.
Well, they have the CONCACAF match on Wednesday.
That's right.
And that's a big one because, and when we talk Sounders, we want to talk about that one a little bit. Because that even down 2-0, I'm not convinced that they're out of it.
It would have been nice if they. It would have been nice if they caught a road goal down there, right? That would have made their lives a hell of a lot more easier. But so, Jeff, as we mentioned a little bit earlier on the top, that I think you hit on something very important, was the fact that I think the fan sentiment coming into this World Cup has been fractured. And I think it's been fractured for quite a long time. And I would probably say since this team looked very one-dimensional against the Netherlands in the 2022 World Cup, from that point forward, considering what we saw in the 2024 Copa America, the debacle with Greg Berhalter, the appointment of Mauricio Pochettino, the time frame in which he had to get this team ready for the 2026 World Cup, and then all of a sudden, coming out of this March window, if you paid attention to any of the U.S. men's national team social media, where your fans like to chirp in, one of the things I was looking for the most was to see exactly who was going to blame the MLS players for these losses, right? And what's interesting about it was Christian Roldan comes on at halftime, and all of a sudden this team gives up 4 goals. And, Max Arston comes in, and don't get me wrong, Arston's performance in that Belgian game wasn't exactly the greatest. But that being said, the game was, by the time most of those guys came in, the game was already lost anyways. It wasn't necessarily the reason for the loss. It didn't necessarily help. But what I will say is there always seems to be this notion that Major League Soccer players do not need should not be involved with the national team. And of course, I always go back to historical context, because quite honestly, the reason why Major League Soccer exists was to build up the ground floor of the U.S. men's national team. That was the whole nexus of Major League Soccer, was develop the ground floor. And so we have a domestic league that actually pumps talent into the national team, right? Anyway, that being said, it seems to me that we've reached this point, like, for whatever reason, there's like this subset of fans that just essentially assume that the national team is an all-star team made up of 26 of our best European-based players, and that Major League Soccer should have absolutely zero input when it comes to the national team, because allegedly they're not good enough, or they're not able to compete at that level. And I would probably say, again, when you go back to some of our best World Cup performances, some of our top players at the time were playing in Major League Soccer. And of course, that was at a time in Major League Soccer, what I like to call the dark ages, where the competition was not good. We didn't have training facilities. Our coaching wasn't good. And yet, for whatever reason, we were still able to have a national team that, yes, did have a nice little collection of European-based players, but also some of our best players were domestically based. And so from that standpoint, it's kind of funny. I always tell these fans, it's like, dude, all you have to do is look at the history. All you have to do is look at the history. You look at every single 4-year cycle from essentially 1990 all the way to today. Now, granted, Major League Soccer didn't come until 96, but when you look at these World Cup rosters, a bulk of these rosters are made up of domestic-based players, and there's a reason for it.
All right, so you've touched on a lot of points, and I'd like to go through this fairly sequentially then with you.
Yeah.
Looking at the history, right? Right before 1998, watched the U.S. play Kuwait in Portland. It was a debacle. Samson was putting in his 3-6-1 thing. And there was some issue over last minute dual citizenship thing that hosed Agus. And there was some dysfunction. Captain for Life had been cut. You had that whole drama, and France was an utter debacle. 4 years later, Arena had himself a very young team, very MLS based. Donovan, Beasley, McBride, Sana. McBride, went on to a European career, but he was the Columbus Crew stud at the time.
Yep.
And you start looking at that team, and they came here to Seattle and they played Honduras. A tough out in CONCACAF, but a CONCACAF opponent, and they looked like they had a chip on their shoulder. And then they're the only side of all of our national teams in the modern era that has won a knockout round game. We've gotten to the knockout round numerous times, but they're the only team that won in the knockout round. And then you start looking at the one since, and that's where the hubbub comes in. You start looking at, I think a lot of the history of it gets back to the debate over Landon Donovan's career. The whole, he didn't stick in Europe is a part of that. You trace that. I do think that there is an argument to me that you want players playing the best possible competition.
Yeah.
But also you want players playing and training, and modern MLS and training is not the same as it used to be back then. But the notion I have is that it becomes a disqualifier.
Right. That's where they lose me.
That's where they lose. That's where I'm lost on it, is that it's an automatic disqualifier, and it's just simply, I don't think it holds up. But as a take of, you want players playing as many players, sure. I mean, we look at a lot of these guys. Earlier this season, I thought Pulisic was the best player in Serie A at the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I would agree.
and it wouldn't hurt to have more of those guys.
I would agree. Yeah.
But a modern MLS is not 10 years ago, 20 years ago. MLS has had clear stages along the way. And, you know, Dempsey's game didn't drop off when he came to Seattle. Is Messi disqualified from playing for Argentina now? You know, so it's like,
probably not.
Yeah. And so I don't like the disqualifier notion of it. I do think that you want players pushing themselves and doing those things, but the modern MLS, there's a reason that players keep getting signed out of MLS.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't be getting signed out of MLS if MLS wasn't doing the thing that you're wanting it to do. So
I think a lot of the discourse is the fact of the development of the development side of the U.S. domestic player, where you did have Brian McBride, and you had DeMarcus Beasley and Landon Donovan and Clint Dempsey, and some of these very good players that actually developed in Major League Soccer at a time when the league was absolute dog shit. And then you see the likes of Max Sarston or Diego Luna or Christian Roldan in the modern day, not necessarily up to the standards of what those players used to be. And I think that's kind of where I think that's where the disconnect comes in, because we allegedly we're at that stage where we have the resources, we have the money, we have the training pitches. So is it the player or is it the coaches? Is it the player or is it the system that's in place where these players allegedly aren't necessarily up to the standards of what those players used to be and the level in which they play at? And my reaction to that is, well, Alex Freeman just went over to Villarreal, and we also have Xavier Gozo at Real Salt Lake. We have Julian Hall at with the New York Red Bulls, Kevin Sullivan that's coming through with the Philadelphia Union, right? So from that standpoint, it's like for every argument, there's always a counter argument, right? So I get the impression that that's the issue. I don't necessarily think it's the quality of the league. It's the development, because we're supposed to be at a level where we're supposed to be better now than those players were 30 years ago.
Well, and it's also then, is it strictly just development to a professional level or the next step level? Like, where does it take their game to the next step where you move past and then elevate your game to that next level?
Yeah.
And we are still, in the big picture as a national team program, fairly 2018 is still this bitter pill for everybody failing to qualify, but we generally advance out of the group.
Yeah.
More often than not. We generally are competitive in group play. That 2022 team was exciting. Not
I would agree.
Long ago. I think it also doesn't help that right now this 4-year window has been an emotional roller coaster for fans.
I would agree.
We're looking at a coaching situation that was handled, like, if it was only handled poorly, that would be better than they handled it. Like, it has been handled just atrociously. We ended up with a good coach. He's done some things. We had a good feeling through the winter. Like, it started feeling better into the winter. And I'm hoping, just like I said, maybe this is a hiccup. But I wasn't too, you just kind of looked at it and went, oh, we're not getting momentum. And I think that this has been such a roller coaster when it was such an opportunity and there was such a reason to feel optimism towards this, building up towards this next big thing, I think that's definitely soured a lot of fans. Because we haven't had that emotionally positive buildup that we were hoping to have coming out of 2022. 2022 looked pretty good. That next
the only situation that I can compare this to, the Greg Berhalter fiasco, was maybe the Bob Bradley transition to Jurgen Klinsmann, because the excuse that Sunil Gulati gave that was based off of results, I actually found that to be
Bradley
bullshit.
had results.
Bradley had results, right? Like when you look at the 2009 Confed Cup, beating Spain and nearly beating Brazil and lifting a major trophy. I guess you can say the Houdini act in the group play of that 2010 World Cup, right? There was a lot to. I understand that. I think it was the 2011 Gold Cup where we coughed up a 2-0 lead, ended up losing to Mexico 4-2. I guess maybe. But me personally, from everything that I heard was that, Sunil had already been talking to Jurgen for a few months anyways, right? So Jurgen had already been laying the groundwork. And I think Sunil was just enamored with Jurgen. But that would be the closest. But, I think, when you look back on it and you talk about the Gio debacle with Claudio and the fact that a friendship was broken over what I considered complete bullshit, and then the way that U.S. Soccer handled it, right? You said if it was handled poor, it would have been handled better. And the interesting thing was, they have the interim in BJ Callahan. They have a handshake agreement in place with Jesse Marsh, only at the 11th hour to essentially fuck him over, only to give the job back to Greg. And then we have Copa America in 2024. You know what I mean? And then the fact that we don't have qualifying this cycle. So there's no carrot. You know what I mean? There's no carrot at the end of the stick.
It's like I said, it's this emotional roller coaster because there were so many things that were opportunities to really build momentum and enthusiasm, and right, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The fall and winter, we started getting a sense of the roster. We started getting a sense of some things, and I do think the roster is pretty obvious now.
I would agree.
I don't think that any of the bubble guys are going to get in. You start looking at. You look at all of the different, major media sites that have posted their roster projections. There's hardly any differences at all in those sites. I mean, the 25th, 26th spots are up for grabs. But we're not talking like the team is loaded with MLS players. Like right. We're talking about a minority of the players on this roster are MLS based. Berhalter, Roldan, Ream. Ream's game against Portugal probably didn't help his case at all, or help that case at all. You want your grizzled veteran player in that situation to be, showing that, and he had a rough game. That doesn't help. But your comment about it had already happened by the time Christian got in, and the goals came. Right. I do think that Roldan is the sort of player that every coach wants on their roster.
I would agree. That
dude's
a winner.
The guy's a winner. He's a workhorse. He's a winner. He's going to do exactly what you're asked him to do. He's not going to go into business for himself on the field and try and do his own thing. He's going to try and implement what the system is calling for, and that's a player you want on your roster. I don't think Christian's a starter on this team.
I would agree.
But I do think that he has an opportunity in a handful of matches to come in and be impactful in different ways as an extra holding midfielder to kill off a game, type of thing. Like he's definitely gonna come in and be that guy. We've seen what he did against Messi in the Leagues Cup final last year. His ability in a big match to step in and be a veteran and not be a problem because he's not playing, that sort of thing. When you start getting to those all-star teams, you start dealing with 26 guys who think they're starters, and realistically, even a national team has to have a hierarchy of lineup. That's
the point that I always try to convey, right? Because there always is a hierarchy of players, right? You're going to have a subset of players that generally understand that they're probably going to have the bulk of the minutes. But that being said, that's the whole point of a national team, right? Because you actually have to have guys in the middle of your roster that you can actually trust to come on, that are not going to be a liability, that are actually going to be playing for the badge and not necessarily thinking that they should be starting. They're going to be causing issues with inside that changing room.
Yeah,
100%.
and playing for the badge, especially right now, is going to be. I do think the home field, the playing for the badge, the emotional side of that is going to be the sort of thing that works favorably for this team. The environment in Seattle against Australia is going to be one of the best home field advantages this
Yeah,
club this national team's almost ever had. Like it's going to be overwhelmingly a USA crowd, and it's
without a
going to
doubt.
be a rockin' 70,000. Just
Yeah,
that's going to be a thing, and I think that a lot of those guys are going to really feel the badge in those games. I think the badge matters to Pulisic. I think the badge matters to some of those guys that we need it to matter. I don't think that we have that holistic problem in the program, but you really have to. There's a difference between feeling it and doing it sometimes, and I feel like Pulisic will, despite some of his like scoring droughts stuff right now, I don't think there's going to be any doubt that he'll have nothing left at the end of every match. Like he's a worker, so I don't
I
think
would
we have
agree
that
with
problem.
that. I would agree with that. I sometimes question, Christian's what's the word? Not commitment. That's not the right word, but there were certainly windows over the course of the last 4 years. Maybe not windows that were Nations League windows, but friendly windows where you're playing Panama for the fifth time in a year and a half. Windows that international friendlies that don't necessarily matter toward anything, and you see the body language, and maybe he's not necessarily 100% pumped up for it, right? So this is almost
But
just an
that's also a
opportunity to
frustration over circumstance, right? Like
correct,
I
correct.
do think that you saw Pulisic is also one of the guys that went through the qualifying debacle of 18,
Yeah,
the 18 cycle, and you saw him feel that at a very young age. And the notion of being captain of the U.S. on U.S. soil and being a guy that puts us back into the knockout rounds, I think is something that he cares about,
yeah. Like I
really.
would, I would never, I would
I
never
don't
say
doubt
that
him of
he.
that at all.
Yeah, I don't think he doesn't care about the national team. It's quite clear that he does. Um, it's just in the back of my mind. I always wonder whether these guys actually, understand the responsibility of what's coming up on deck. You know what I mean? Like this is a type of World Cup that actually is so monumental for this country. Because right now there's still a lot of fans that treat the World Cup like the Olympics every 4 years. Like soccer fans are still going to be soccer fans, right? But this is like an opportunity to take the game to a level that eclipses '94.
We're also looking at the club and country loyalty debate is something that isn't unique to any one country.
Correct.
You see that a lot of times, does, which badge matters more, the loyalty. We're getting a lot of hints of out of Brazil, that why maybe they haven't done so well is because the players don't have the same attachment to it. So many of them leave Brazil so young. They don't have quite the
Right.
emotional investment that the team hasn't achieved as much. That's the narrative coming out of South America, becomes a lot of that criticism. England, the guys get that a lot. Caring about the badge. They got to bring it home and they haven't.
Right.
And the pressure on them is just enormous. Uh, but I do think the club and country argument gets really interesting. Uh, and this might get to the Christian's body language that you're talking about. Is I think during friendly windows there's a little bit of a push pull there, right? Like
Right.
you're traveling 8 time zones, you're playing a match that's essentially a scrimmage, and then flying back midweek to go play again. How much are you going to put in? There is some pacing of players. I don't think that implies a lack of care. That's just listening to your body. Um, I do want to see, you know, I want to see the guys' blood, sweat, and tears on U.S. soil in the red, white, and blue. You know,
Oh,
that's what yeah, I want.
well,
Let's
yeah,
cheers.
well,
You know,
I have to admit that, post Nations League 2025, I was wondering, and I was thinking there for a good solid month of whether or not necessarily the commitment was there, but whether or not they actually cared. Because those performances, even in a tournament, they had, I think at that point they had won 3 years straight. Their performances were flat. Their body language suggested that they probably wanted to be anywhere but there. And from that, I was just kind of thinking about it. It's like, well, okay, those guys back in the 90s and the 2000s, for the most part, they needed the national team more than ever, because at that
yeah,
point, those type of opportunities weren't available to American players. Like when you think about the Claudio Reynas, the Kobe Jones, Tab Ramos, and you start Tony Miola, who actually had, I think he had Botafogo and Southampton on deck. I don't think he accepted either of them. But that being said, it's like the national team was a buoy for a lot of those players to make the jump to Europe and to radically change their lives forever. And then when you think about this generation, it's like a lot of these players were handed opportunities with big clubs at a very early age, where they actually got to bypass Major League Soccer, where they didn't need the national team to buoy them. Right. And so the question was whether or not they actually needed the national team as much as the guys that, from generations past, because without the national team, they wouldn't have their opportunities. Where some of these kids were fortunate enough to make those jumps. Christian to Borussia Dortmund at 15, 16 years old. I think Wes made the jump as well too. Tyler made the jump fairly early over to to Europe from the New York Red Bulls, right? So a lot of these guys didn't necessarily need that buoy, that bounce from the national team.
yeah. A lot of the guys that had nice careers over the last couple decades in Europe had them after MLS and a good World Cup performance. Dempsey,
Yep.
McBride, those guys got their opportunities because they were in their 20s, in their prime, and teams could sign them and they could step in and play and start for a Fulham or somebody like that right away.
Yeah.
Ronaldo got his chance in Germany that way back in the 90s,
Yep.
things like that. And then a lot of those guys went on to have really nice stretches of careers. But the opportunities now and the way uh, players can go over. I think also our youth national team programs showcase things a little bit better than they maybe used to. You see the guys in the
Yeah.
U18s, U19s, U17 type tournaments. Those games are scouted a little differently maybe than they used to be. Players are
100%.
coming up with that. Those opportunities are going through, and that's what got the Westons and the Sargents and all of
Mm-hmm.
those guys, they're younger opportunities to it. Players are more willing to give it a shot. If you're skipping college entirely, which more players do, the opportunity of going over at a younger age, is more likely to be available to you. Um, and so I think that just as every era has its evolution of things. It'll be interesting to see also how MLS affects coming out of the next World Cup, because in the next year of the calendar switch, and how that's going to affect uh, transfer windows and players wanting to come here, and how they come here. Will that affect the quality of play over time? But that's a whole nother question down the road. But I want to see players taking the opportunity to play where they get a chance to play. It is not better to go sit on the bench somewhere and just train than it is to play. Playing is better than training. Um, and so I don't want to see guys going over the bench, go over to be bench players when you could start 34 matches in playoffs in the U.S. I want guys competitively play. Match fit is different. So
Yeah, that's exactly why I don't care if they're playing in Major League Soccer, right? Minutes are minutes no matter where they're playing. Which is the reason why, I can understand why guys like Sebastian Berhalter or Roldan and even a Diego Luna are getting shouts over guys like Yunus Musa at this stage. you know I can understand the reason why, and also just from a tactical standpoint as well too, right? There's going to be different skill sets that fits Pochettino, whereas maybe that might not be the case for a guy like Musa at this current point. But I do want to ask you about pathways in Major League Soccer for the young American player, because I think right now, I think at the U23 level right now, I think there's like what 3.5 Americans spread across by average on Major League Soccer rosters right now. And so when you look at it, certain teams definitely have pathways, while other teams don't necessarily have those type of pathways for young American players. When you look at some of the big boys in the league, you see them using their DPs and TAM monies for overseas type of players. And so from across the league, it just seems like it's scattered. Where
Yeah,
it seems like the academies are after. It seems like the academies are an afterthought.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily unique to MLS. I mean, you look at
Correct.
which clubs
Yeah,
have the
sure.
best. You look in England, which clubs have the best academies. Coincidentally, those teams seem to be at the top of the table.
Correct. Yeah.
I don't
They use
think
their academies for profit.
You got to be able to fill in your own gaps, right?
Yeah.
But you look at the opportunities that so many Seattle players are getting coming out of the academy, playing for the Defiance, coming up and getting minutes and matches with Brian where he actually plays them. And so many players, when international windows come up, it'll say, going with the U20s, going with whatever, those opportunities are more prevalent in some clubs than others. And that's an approach, because it's an investment, right? With no guarantee of result. There's a potential result is massive. When we see those historical teams that took a step back, brought up their academy players, Manchester United in the 90s, these different waves of play, Arsenal's had a wave of players that way before. Liverpool's been bringing up a ton of players the last few years that are young out of their academy and that have a lot of potential in England. And the Sounders are filling a lot of gaps with these young players coming up through their ranks as well. You want those sorts of programs happening, but the challenge becomes, what is the actual cost benefit analysis depending upon the ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have an ownership that thinks more big picture and less season by season, because you want those guys developing over time, and you're not going to bring up a 17-year-old to be an impact player very often, but you want him in a professional environment and getting matches and training with the Sounders and playing with the Defiance and playing cup matches and going on the road with the first team and getting minutes here and there, but still getting collectively all of those minutes is the reason the young Seattle players have had success in the last several years. Brian's willing to play them.
Sure, and I think a lot of that has to do with some of their salary cap restrictions as well too. Some of the contracts that Weibel has handed out that may or may not have been necessarily smart. That being said, it's like your depth is going to have to be potentially younger players that are not going to necessarily bump up against that cap, which is probably why Obed Vargas gets sold instead of it's early instead of in the summer, which makes a little bit more sense, at least in my mind. It's like, okay, cool. We knew he was going to go, but why not into the summer when you can actually use him potentially in a CONCACAF Champions Cup type of setting? Obviously, it's going to help. Well, maybe there was some financial issues that the Sounders needed to address sooner rather than later, right? Then Reed Baker Whiting goes to Nashville. And so, you see some of these young kids that have come up, were developed, and all of a sudden out the door, right?
Well,
so you're talking
about though, Seattle's setting itself up for the next couple of windows to be able to do a big one or two.
Sure.
Like there's some.
But to your point, though, you're talking about an ownership that's thinking long term and not just season by season.
Yeah. You definitely want to be able to set yourself up to make those moves. I think the Sounders in the next 2 or 3 windows are going to be making a couple of big moves because they'll be getting out from under a couple of contracts.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, there's a couple of contracts I think that they'll be happy to move on from.
Yeah, the Jordan Morris deal. I still shake my head on that Morris deal.
I mean, here's the thing. I love JMO.
I do too.
But they're paying a premium for a guy whose game no longer is what it once. Like he's in. He just he still has moments, and we love his commitment and how hard he plays when he plays. But he's a contract that they don't necessarily. That's not helping their their roster right now.
Well, right. Well, you just hit it. You hit the nail on the head. It's like when he plays.
Yeah.
Right. You hit the nail on the head. The dude is he's a shot fighter at this stage, right? He can't stay on the field. And it was not a surprise that he gets injured in the first game of the season. Granted, I actually like the fact that I like the fact that João Paulo's contract came off the books last season. But again, one of the things that I was a little disappointed was the fact that, they're still re-upping some of these guys that are 29, 30. And I understand. I understand you're trying to bridge the gap until the calendar change, you get to the calendar change. And then maybe you're going to retool the roster, get a little bit younger at that stage. Okay, fine. And maybe between now and then you want to sell tickets and stay competitive. Totally understand it. Right. But you're banking on a lot of ifs, and you're hoping that your roster is going to be able to stay healthy between now and then.
Yeah, I'd like to have Obed Vargas against Tigres this week.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
you're banking on a lot.
Yeah, that sort of thing. And this gets into some of those rules over time. We have to hope change in MLS as it evolves over time too. There's a lot more leeway than there used to be. A lot more development of players through academy systems than there used to be now, and those opportunities. But if you're going to come up and play, like if you were a Sounder last year, play 50 matches against everybody from Atletico de Madrid to Inter Miami, you can't argue that they're not playing against top competition.
Sure.
So but again, is that universally across the board?
I think it was a couple videos, a couple videos ago, I was talking about the fact that because of Major League Soccer's roster, their roster breakdown and their roster restrictions, it really kind of puts an emphasis on how teams can build out because you have DPs and you have TAM level and you have GAM level. If you're a team that does have some roster flexibility and you spend some money on a DP and then you spend some money on a TAM level player, and the only thing you have left is general allocation money, you're essentially pigeonholed into a certain subsect of players that are only going to be available to you, unless you're able to swing a trade and get some more TAM or whatever the case may be. And me personally, I don't like it. And me personally, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the eternal capitalist in the room. Me personally, I feel like teams should be able to spend their money. Like if your cap is this, fine. You should be able to spend within that structure. You should be able to spend it any which way you like. Me personally, I don't like it because me personally, I just think the way that happens, it just forces parity. I don't necessarily like it. And me personally, one of the things that you just mentioned that, as this thing evolves, Major League Soccer would probably do itself a big justice, not only raising the cap a little bit, but taking away the TAM and the GAM and just letting teams within the structure of a salary cap be able to build out a roster. And there should be no roster size limits. If a team can fit 30 players inside a salary cap and another team can't, you should have spent your money better.
Yeah, and you're seeing that around the world with the FIFA's financial fair play rules. Team can spend money they can't spend money they don't, type of thing. You can't just have the deep pocket owner spending money making it his fantasy league team. It has to be within different contexts, and you want those things to be a thing so that the businesses are sustainable. But I think there's some artificial constrictions on roster builds in the league that are outdated for the business model that they have now.
For sure. Well, when you consider the soccer specific stadiums across this country now that are generating revenue, and you consider the television model that they're under now, and the fact that most owners now are billionaires and not millionaires anymore, you see the training facilities and the academies, and you see some of these revenue generators that the league has, right? You're looking at the salary cap this year. I think it was like 6.425 this season. That's outside the DPs. You know what I mean? 6 million, six and change.
Yeah,
this season. It seems a little ridiculous, don't you think?
Yeah, we're in a situation where The ownership changes and evolution of the league has made that business model change, and I do think that there's going to be some change because we're going to have a commissioner change down the road.
Yeah.
There's going to be some of those things that
Sure.
will happen. A wave of players is coming of age. Each time they come of age, they change the negotiations they do for the CBA, and I think we'll see some of that stuff. But yeah, the salary cap, given the known revenue streams that teams can claim, it's like, yeah, the artificial constriction on that just isn't there. I think that there's still some old guard in MLS that are fearful of when contraction hit. You go back to the turn of the century when they stopped expanding and they contracted briefly again before expanding, and the stadium build was kind of just starting. Whereas now the stadium thing is a norm, not a luxury or a rarity. The league is too big, but for a first division, but it is.
I would agree. I would agree with that.
They would be better off having a 2-tiered league, with
like a promotion relegation.
Within the context of those, like 5 or 40 teams would be a 20 and an A and a B. And that would satisfy a lot of people's desire for our promotion relegation issues and stuff like that as well. It'll be interesting to see. I do think that we're starting to see the East and the West function almost as separate entities through scheduling. I would agree with that. Now,
I would agree with that.
It's getting to the point where you play so few games against the other one that the bulk of your games, all of your playoffs, your Open Cup matches and everything is just really, east of the Mississippi, west of the Mississippi.
I would agree
they're
with that.
Almost
100%.
starting to function like two separate leagues in some ways that just happen to have,
the same badge,
championship game.
Championship
game at the top, which can also be interesting, but I'm kind of getting off topic there, but I want to see more ambition in the salary cap side of things. Little less restriction, a little more letting them take some chances. The pockets of the ownership exists there. If guys are failing, let them sell it. There's people who want to get into sports ownership and have the pockets to do it.
I would agree.
And open up the club that way, and then that would satisfy some of the criticisms against it too, because it would elevate that. So
and plus, a much higher salary cap actually really opens the door to Europe too, especially if you want to take on loan players, young loan players, or if you want to buy young players, you're going to have the ability to do it. As of right now, you can't necessarily do it with the roster constrictions right now, because obviously if you're trying to, bring in a young player on loan for 2 seasons and he's making $50,000 a week, how are you going to fit that into your tiered system? It just doesn't. The math doesn't math as
the math on that doesn't go the way that they want to. But I ownership changes and new ownership groups coming in, and the expansion groups thing on the next wave of like CBA agreements will change those as well, because we're seeing that in some other leagues in this country that the ownership change over time has led to some more ambitious approaches to certain. There's a couple of leagues that have really seen it. The NWSL is getting it right now. The women's league, much more ambitious ownership groups, much more. The salary cap jumped. They were able to start bringing back a couple of players who went overseas. The Katarina Macarios, Lindsay Heapses are coming back.
You're right about that. Yeah.
So and because they're able to pull the purse strings a little bit differently now. And I'd like to see a little more, like you said, you have your particular reasoning, but I don't think that that's a bad take at all. I want to see them, if you can spend money, spend it how you want to.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of getting to the end of it, and I do want to talk a little bit about the Sounders, because they actually have started off the season actually quite well. 4 wins out of 6. Only 6 goals on the season, 2 conceded, a +4 differential. Not exactly the goal tallies I was hoping to see through the first 6. But that being said, it is what it is. Still viable in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Granted, they did lose to Tigres 2-0 in the first leg. And again, I probably would have been a little bit more happy with a road goal considering the chances that they had in that game. And, it's a little unfortunate that they didn't come away with at least one. By the way, I hate the road goal in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. I actually think road goals, I hate road goals, but it is what it is. It is the model currently. Me personally, goals are just goals, but it is what it is, right? So if so Tigres will take a 2-goal advantage coming back up north to Seattle. If they score a goal, essentially it's over. But that being said, the Sounders still are in a very good position to potentially win this thing at home. My only concern is whether Tigres now are just going to park the bus, and the Sounders are going to have to try to score 3, potentially 4 against a low block at home against Tigres in the second leg. And that's my only concern.
In the first half, absolutely, they're going to come at me, bro. Right? Why wouldn't they? The weather sucks right now.
Come at me, bro.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. Why would they do anything but park the bus?
Yeah.
Right. It's going to be 46 degrees and raining at kickoff, and the only difference is this time it's on grass. But now Seattle as a start, defense win championships, and it's a good thing because they're not scoring goals, and that has to improve. They're very deep. Both goalkeepers are good. The back line has played well so far. They haven't conceded weak, soft goals.
That's good.
The match at Tigres, it looked coming into the half. There was a moment where I think it was Rothrock just missed a far post curler after the penalty had been sailed into the crowd, where it looked like were they going to have this 1-goal lead, right? And it didn't happen. They gave up the goal. The game got stretched. They gave up the second goal. But yeah, if you're Tigres, why take chances in the first half?
Correct.
If Seattle gets a goal, then if you're Tigres, you have to go get the road goal. But because you can't just comfortably wait, because all of a sudden you give up the second goal and suddenly you're in penalties. You didn't fly up here with a 2-goal lead to go to penalties.
That's exactly right.
So Seattle's got to come out of the gate blasting. They got to score an early goal and take Tigres out of the comfort zone that they want to be in, which is to sit back and absorb and counter. And there'll be a good Mexican crowd contingent there, because there always is when this is there. So there'll be they'll oddly enough, one of the fun things that happens, I don't know if you've been to any of those games here.
Oh, I have. Yes.
Is like the Chivas fans or the America fans will come and cheer for Seattle just to root against the Mexican club they don't like. And that can be kind of fun too. You'll see a group of Chivas fans all cheering for Seattle or whatever. Sometimes, because the rivalry moment is kind of fun.
I've seen
because that happened
first legs against Santos Laguna, and I think it might have been Monterrey when we played. That was years ago, though.
Yeah, but it was just there'd be this little group, and you see them all in their Chivas jerseys, but they're clearly cheering against the rival team, and that's fine. But now I think the atmosphere will be good. The biggest thing that Seattle has to do is get that early goal. If they concede early, Brian may as well clear his bench. They're not going to score 4. They have to score 4 at that point, because 3-1 you're down on away goal, so you have to score 4, and 4 just doesn't feel realistic at all. But you get one early, put them on, force them to use their subs at halftime. Make some changes that maybe they didn't want to do. Put them a little bit on the back burner. Your team starts getting some crowd momentum. Seattle can then force it. Penalties for Seattle is a good outcome, because then it gives you a chance, because you were down 2-0, right? And you're going to be playing Fry. and Seattle in penalties with those guys, whether it's Thomas or Fry, has typically been
Pretty decent.
pretty decent. So I like Seattle's chances in that environment. But they've got to get an early one. I don't know that they can. I don't know that they can go into the second half down 2 goals and 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 get those 2 goals against a team at that point that's going to have absolutely no motivation to leave their own half of the field. It's going to be 7 defenders in the box every time you start moving. There's going to be just too many trees in the way to get anything. All you're going to have is lobbing it in and Route 1 soccer at that point.
Yeah, the only reason why I bring that up is because of the fact that maybe Tigres would want to go after that road goal early and put the
You
thing
can make
away.
the case, but the risk of doing that though is that it stretches you thin, and then you give up the counter, and all of a sudden you don't get it.
But we're not.
You give it up the other way.
Yeah, but we're not really scoring goals. We're not really letting.
Yeah, the
letting,
Seattle team hasn't.
We're lighting it up though.
Yeah, Seattle.
Yeah, we're not lighting it up.
Yeah, we're not lighting it up. So yeah, you can make the case that maybe they'll do that. That would be a surprise. I think that would be an interesting surprise, because if that first half, that first 10, 12 minutes is just end to end, man, that Lumen will be rocking tomorrow night if that happens. Right? Tigres comes out and pushes in the first 5 minutes, puts a couple guys in there, and doesn't sit back on the bus. I still think they're going to, but if they did, that would create some interesting moments. But I like Seattle's counter against that.
Who starts up top?
Given that they need to be able to score directly, they're gonna. It'll be Morris.
Okay.
I think. But I mean, this is the sort of game that a Rusnak and a Rothrock and a Musovsky have to be pretty good. But again, I'm curious to see who it'll be. I didn't go, or I haven't checked training the last couple days to see kind of what was going with that, but at least they get to play it in Seattle. It doesn't have to be in Spokane or something. What's up
with Jesus?
I haven't seen him on the looking on the. I don't have an update on that, so I haven't looked at the availability report for Wednesday night yet. A lot of that stuff won't get posted until tomorrow or day of. So
okay.
Brian may have commented on it at training today, but I haven't had a chance to look at that sort of stuff yet on Jesus. It's the sort of game that Jesus could be really important in if he's available.
Yeah, I was gonna say, right. I mean, one of the things that
him right up front because I don't have confidence that he's available.
I mean, that's the reason why I asked, and it also, depth took a hit when Georgie Minogo went out the door as well too, right? Yeah. And so you're also banking on certain guys staying healthy. Now, I think Areola played in that first leg, correct? So Paul, I think he did.
I'm looking up the box scores on that, yeah.
So I would probably assume that Paul's he's probably going to feature in this one.
Well, and they looked all right. In good stretches of that. I wouldn't be surprised if it was very, very different than the team that started last week.
I would probably assume
a fairly similar starting 11, because there were some moments where they looked pretty good.
Let me ask you a question real quick. Is Snyder Brunel now permanently playing next to Christian? Because I've noticed the last
he seems to be there a lot.
Yeah, he seems to be there quite a bit. He's getting minutes.
I hear his name on the broadcast an awful lot.
I wasn't a big believer in Hassani Dotson when we brought him in. I didn't think he was an MLS starter, an MLS starting caliber center mid, right? So I was kind of curious exactly how that depth was going to play out and what Brunel's role was going to be on this team. Well, and he's been getting a lot of minutes.
He's been getting minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been kind of looking down at the stat sheet right now, and kind of filtering through it, and where are we looking at? Rothrock has 5 games. Roldan has all 6. Rosanac has 6. Reagan has 6. You start looking at Snyder Burnell, 6 matches, 2
Yeah.
starts in league play. So he's
Hmm.
basically playing every match.
And Yaimar's out. Yaimar's out.
Right.
Kim is out, and so I think Kozarienzi started as a center back in Mexico
Yep.
last
Whatever the
week.
starting 11 was in
Yeah,
Mexico is probably
yeah.
not going to be too dissimilar Wednesday night.
Kozarienzi as a center back.
You got to get 11 guys on the field.
I
Some
hear you.
teams.
I hear you. And I think
So
Cody Baker still with the team?
I'm looking at the roster
I
stuff right
think he
now.
might be.
Yeah, he's played in 2 matches
Okay.
in the regular season.
Fair
Nuhu's
enough.
played in all 6.
Okay.
Jesus has played in all 6 league matches. So
Okay. All right.
you got.
So how do you see it playing out?
Yeah.
How do you see it playing out?
I think Seattle forces penalties.
That would be
And then it's a crapshoot. I think Seattle gets the 2 goals. And I
forces
think that
penalties, huh?
the coming up, this is not quite, Columbus in February, but 46 and drizzly, the weather sucks this week. Like, it's bad. And that's in Seattle's favor.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I would like to think that maybe some some home field conditions come in. I think Seattle does. We've been a good cup team in recent years. This is the sort of game where a Rusnak can really cement himself as the playmaker. And I think that Seattle gets that 2-0 return match because I just feel like they were so close in so many parts of that game last week that goals change games. So Rothrock's curls in, the guy shoots it over the bar, it's 1-0. I imagine the entire second half would have played out differently, 1-0 Seattle coming out of the break than it would have the other way. Seattle would have been able to
Mm-hmm.
park the bus and I think would have handled it. And worst case scenario would have been 1-1.
1-1. Right.
And 1-1 going into the match Wednesday is a different game because then you can just draw because you have your road goal. So
You have your road goal. Yeah.
from flow of play standpoint, I don't feel like Brian feels like they have to do necessarily too much different than a lot of what they did. It's a tough place to go and play, and they managed to play reasonably well in a really adverse environment. Going down to Mexico is always hard. So
I do remember a World Cup qualifier, and I think this might have been in 2001. And it was in Columbus, Ohio.
the 20-degree game, yeah.
Yeah, where the Mexican national team was forced to play in Columbus, Ohio. And I was going to say it's somewhere between like 15 and 20 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the Mexican team had the hand warmers in their gloves, and they didn't even take the pregame because they weren't used to the cold. So yeah, I would say that 40 degrees and raining definitely plays into
And it's gonna be
Seattle's back
windy.
pocket.
It's a
Yeah, it's going to be
chilly.
windy.
It's chilly. Like it's
Yeah.
a damp cold. 60 degrees and rainy is a warm damp. That's a different thing entirely. It's like 46 degrees. Like right now, I'm just looking at my thing. It is not nice outside when trees are moving right there. Like I'm
So
right near the water. I'm right near the water. Like I'm just north of town
yeah.
on the Sound. Like
Oh, okay.
just right
I
up the
gotcha.
hill. Like I smell salt air when I go outside. So, but my trees are, yeah, they shouldn't be facing that way.
That's funny. That's funny. All right, so I got 2 questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
One of them has to do with the CONCACAF Champions League, and another one doesn't. So the first question that I have for you is: Will the final feature a Major League Soccer team this year? Will we
I
get
think
one?
I was looking at the bracket, right? If Seattle gets past Tigres, yes, I think they get all the way to the final. Otherwise, I'm
Okay.
not confident. I don't know.
Not LAFC or Nashville.
Well, LAFC maybe because they're. I was thinking Galaxy, but LAFC has been good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've been really good.
They've been really good. You could make a case that Nashville has the excitement of doing something like that. Kind of might be a thing, but I don't know. I think that the Mexican teams take CONCACAF differently than they take Leagues Cup.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
So I do think Seattle definitely has a chance to do something there if they get through penalties Wednesday. Putting a lot on
Okay.
Fry. I'm putting a lot on Fry.
Well, see, Nashville might be my team this year in Major League Soccer. Nashville, and it's funny because
Who are
Miami
they playing
retooled.
in this bracket? I don't have the bracket open.
Ooh,
I'm drawing a
let
blank.
me. I'll just get you. I'll get it
Because
to you right now.
it's basically MLS versus Liga MX, MLS versus Liga Mexico.
Right, and I want to say it's Club America, but don't. Uh, yeah, it is Club America. They play tomorrow at 11:30. It's 8:30 West Pacific. Yep, they
Okay.
play Club America, and I think that is that, and that one is that is at a 0-0 draw. No goal scored in the first leg.
Well, I'd love to be wrong, but I do think the Mexican teams take this tournament a little more seriously.
Yeah,
But I'd like to see Seattle. I do think Seattle wins the match. Then the question is, is winning the match enough to advance? Like they win two to
yeah, I hear
one,
what
it
you're
doesn't
saying.
matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Win 2-1, you still lose. You win 3-1, it doesn't matter. If they win 2-0 and go into penalties, I like their chances a lot because that would be demoralizing to a team because I like the team that the penalties are better for
yeah, I
mentally
hear you.
in those spots. So that's where
Mm,
we're at.
yeah,
Other
Nashville
than that,
just might be.
is
Nashville
you're
just
saying
might be my
Nashville's your
favorite team
team
this.
to beat this year?
Yeah, like I like them. I like everything about them. I think they're well coached and I think they're well disciplined. I think they're organized. And the reason why I like them is because Miami doesn't have Sergio Busquets or Jordi Alba this year. And I think that was a big piece to their puzzle last year in
Yeah.
the playoffs, especially. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think coming off the World Cup, Miami is going to be the team to beat in the East this year. Um,
yeah,
they're going to be two beat up. We'll see if they have the excitement of the new building, but that's not going to carry them in the second half of the season. That's a right now excitement.
yeah. That's a right now excitement. Yeah. All
So
right,
Seattle gets to play a bunch of games on grass though,
I think that's going to
which is
help.
well,
I think
and
that's going to help them.
I do hope that um,
I hope they keep it.
maybe a a summer break and playing a bunch of matches on grass will extend Jordan this year.
I would like to see Lumen Field keep grass instead of the
Yes,
instead of
the
the turf.
Seahawks won't do that though.
I know they won't.
That is
Last
that is that
question.
is why, and we talked about this before, why the 30,000 seat Long
Yeah.
Acres site
Yep.
stadium in
That.
2032 is highly likely.
Yeah. I think that's going to 100% happen.
No,
Last
it's
question.
yeah.
Last question for you, sir.
Hmm.
All right. U.S. versus Mexico. Your favorite U.S. versus Mexico match of all time,
Match
going back way.
from a match standpoint, the
Or
Columbus
win.
match
Or
you
win.
missed it. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Columbus match, the first of the Dos Acero era. That
Hmm.
2001 match was pretty cool. Um, I honestly think when the U.S. beat Mexico right before the '94 World Cup, we played Mexico, and it was a Rose Bowl type game, and it was right before the World Cup in '94,
Okay.
and it carried that team a long way to where they got to play that knockout round game against Brazil and got them out of their group, and it just created so much of a buzz out of it at a time when the Mexicans really still didn't think of, like, the rivalry was more us punching up than them feeling, over time that we've seen some leveling. And it really set the stage for that rivalry becoming what it's been over the last 30 years. It
Hmm.
really elevated that entire thing. Um, that's the one A, but it's still, there's nothing that beats beating Mexico in the 2002 World Cup
Yeah.
knockout round.
Yeah.
Because
See,
the biggest game
everybody.
that's ever mattered,
Yeah.
we won.
We won. And
Yep.
and that's the thing. It's like obviously it's going to be World Cup 2002 because obviously it was the biggest match we've ever played on the biggest stage, 100%.
Yep.
But I go back to two. Gold Cup 91.
Yeah, that was a big one because that was the semi.
Yeah, it was the semis, and we beat Mexico 2-0, and that's when the legend of Dos Aceros started. Is in 91.
That was what kind of got Bora the legitimacy
Yeah.
of coming in when he had just taken over the club.
But we end up beating Honduras for our first Gold Cup crown in 91, and I think that also kind of buoyed it. You were mentioning that match before the 94 World Cup, having that victory and having that belief that you could beat Mexico already under your belt kind of prepares you. But also Copa America 95.
Yeah, I thought you
95.
Thought you might
in
go
the
there.
In the quarterfinal. And by the way, we actually have a very good history in the Copa America. We've reached the semis we've reached the semis of the Copa America on a few different occasions. But the interesting thing, this was quarterfinal of the Copa America, and that was one of the nastiest matches I've ever seen. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like that was a match of brutality. And like Mexico, seriously, the sliding tackles that Mexico was putting on us were just brutal. There was at least 4 different times where a red card should have been shown, but the ref was letting them play. And in return, we were doing the exact same thing, and they were letting it go. And then it goes to a shootout.
That team had peak Winalda, right?
Yeah.
That team had Thomas Dooley. That team had Marcelo Balboa. Those guys put up with nothing.
Yeah.
Those and it goes to nothing. Yeah.
And it goes to a shootout, and Brad Friedel has like the shootout of his lifetime. Like it was beautiful. Yeah. It was beautiful. And we end up going to a semifinal where we eventually lose. I think we finished third that year.
They won the third place match on that.
They won the third place match, yeah. And for me, those were the 2 best ones. But I think it was. There was a friendly in the Jurgen Klinsmann era where we went down to Estadio Azteca and actually won. That's the only time we ever won down there. Yeah, but I remember World Cup qualifying 2009, and Charlie Davies opens the scoring with a beautiful curl into the far post.
Yeah,
and I think it was like Guantanamo Blanco ends up bearing the winner. And Mexico ends up winning that game. But yeah, I do remember that one. I remember after Charlie Davies scored, I was like, "Oh shit, we're gonna win! We're gonna win!" It's like, oh, never mind.
I loved the moment when like Michael Bradley scored in the Azteca in the qualifier. That one was pretty good because like he goes over to celebrate, and I'm thinking to myself, "Dude, stay at midfield."
Stay at midfield.
Stay at midfield. That rivalry is so good though now. It really is. The matches matter, the players care, the fans are into it. Stakes are there because it's so much bragging rights. It has everything you want.
The man in the mirror match was pretty good too. World Cup qualifying 2021, where Pulisic has the man in the mirror. Yeah, that was pretty good too. Yeah, that was pretty good too.
And it's such a good level of play. It brings the best out in both sides so often. That's why I miss the hexagonal.
Yeah.
The hexagonal and the dilution of this tournament to where qualifying is going to be negligible. The hexagonal was almost better than the World Cup. Like those games were so good. Panama came here to Seattle during one of those. It was a great environment. Going down to El Salvador and Panama and having to play those matches was so intense, and it's diluted the quality of CONCACAF matches, like because their import isn't as much because there's so much less of the hexagon. Like you play them now, there's less on the line.
Right.
Those games, despite maybe not respecting the opposition as much, those games used to mean so much more.
Because I also think it actually accurately prepared you for a World Cup, having to go into those environments.
Yeah, I had an argument with a friend one time. I was like, how many points out of 15 would a top European side get playing at Mexico, at Guatemala, at Honduras, at Costa Rica, and at Jamaica. Out of 15, do those road trips, play those matches with those stakes. How many points would almost any team get? And that is
8
that,
maybe.
yeah. And you'd feel happy with it. And that was what the U.S. was constantly pulling out of those.
Yeah.
Those, and our team was better for it.
Worst
I think.
loss. I said worst loss. Trinidad, is that still the worst loss, or Costa Rica at 85?
Costa Rican 85. Costa Rican 85 was right as NASL died. And Michel Platini, one of the great players of all time, was set to actually possibly go to the Cosmos. And he said in World Soccer, well, I'm not going to the U.S. now that football is dead there after that game. Yeah. It took a generation to fix that.
Right. Because I remember...
It took FIFA giving us 94 and frankly punishing Mexico so much from the 90 World Cup that set us up to be the second place team in that group. Like the margin on that, it was a decade of fight just to get back to anything. The not qualifying in 18 was such a gut punch.
Yeah.
To it, because it looked like they had a chance to really do it, and they didn't, and they should have. Again, I think it's also because they should have.
For sure. Do you think, by the way, just because the way that I remember it was that we came into that match in 85 against Costa Rica needing a win or a draw, and it just so happens their goalkeeper had one of the greatest games I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, he was lights out.
And I think the interesting thing when I think back to that World Cup qualifying cycle in 17, I always ask myself if U.S. soccer didn't hastily fire Jurgen Klinsmann, would we would have qualified? Just from the stability factor, and I'm like, yeah, I think we probably would have.
I think you can make. They panic fired him.
Yeah, they panic fired him.
They panic fired him. And then they panic hired.
Yeah, Bruce.
And it didn't give them a chance to do a proper search or anything, and it did unsettle some things. But that's a team that should have qualified, so that sucker punch. The Costa Rica game, I mean, we were still, will we ever qualify for a World Cup mode, was everybody's mentality. But when the NASL had just died,
and some of those guys on the 85 team were playing indoors too.
Well, like Rick Davis. They had to. They had to at that point. They had transitioned to playing MISL. There was a 3 or 4 year window where the MISL rocked because of it. That 85 to 88, 89 MISL, Soccer Stars, Sidekicks, Blast. Yeah, that era of MISL was spectacularly good. And
I think that's the reason. And I think that's the reason why Gansler left some of those guys off the 89 qualifying.
Yeah, because the 88 Olympic team in Seoul was loaded with those guys and had done okay. But there was a handful of young guys like Brent Goulet and whatnot that ended up being the team that Osiander had brought to Korea in 88 that then Gansler didn't take with him. Gansler essentially took the NCAA All-American team.
Yeah.
And that was the national team in 89. But that was also with the mentality of we had just gotten the World Cup and he was building for 94 more than 90. I don't know. I don't know that Gansler was really expecting to qualify. He was hopeful, but that team, like the 8 matches, because it was a pentagon, it was a 5. I think in 8 matches only didn't score a goal a game. There was a lot of 0-0, 1-1, 1-0 games to get there. I mean, the Trinidad game was one moment from Paul Caligari and a really good goalkeeping performance by Tony. And so, that era was very fragile because, they just didn't get games.
And by the way, that Trinidad team was amazing. That actually had some of the best forwards in the region at the time. What's his ass was on that team? Former
York.
Dwight York was on that team. Yeah.
That Trinidad team actually was surprised not to win. And it wasn't just that Calgary scored that goal, which was a nice goal. It was, Miola and the defensive line there then held a 1-goal lead. Like they played a good professional defensive match. But yeah, Gensler had an incredibly young team. Eventually it got handed off post World Cup to Bora, and then Bora had the residency team. 2 years of it just basically being a club in Fullerton.
Exactly.
I think they played Iceland a bunch of times or whatever. Like it's just anybody who was available, they just played week after week after week like a club team, which worked.
They tried to do. I think they tried to do it in the NASL in '83.
Yeah, Team America.
Team America,
was the
Team
goal
America.
But the NASL teams didn't want to give up their best American players.
Yeah,
that's
exactly
Sounders didn't
right.
want to give up Mark Peterson.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There was no incentive. There was no incentive around the league for those teams to release their best players. That's exactly right.
You ended up with basically a lot of green card players playing for Team America that weren't really the national team.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So there was some interesting approaches to it back then, but I just looking to circle back around coming out of 2022 in Qatar to where we are now. I wanted to feel better. I thought we would be further along. I really did. It has been a disappointing cycle on a lot of levels. The Copa, the way they've handled the coaching and things. There's been moments and periods where you were optimistic and not. If the best player, the U.S. needs the best player of their generation right now, the McKennies and the Pulisic. They're the leading players of their generation to go out and in June and July be those guys. And if they can have, it's a lot of pressure put on them, but that's their job.
That's their job.
That's their job. The U.S. can go out and be very effective, can get a result against Turkey, can beat Australia, can stand toe-to-toe with Paraguay, come out of the group in a good spot as opposed to a second-place team, get a better draw. We have that
or
round of 32
place
now. Win a knockout round game to get into the 16, and then I think you can have some momentum and maybe start feeling really good about the state of the game again. But that's what it's anything less than that, and we're going to be feeling really down in July.
I would agree. Like if 3 or 4 players can really lift this team to a quarterfinal appearance, I think all will be fine.
Yeah, quarterfinal appearance would
be fine.
A lot.
Yeah. Sure.
Lot of it. Because I do think also when you look at the top teams, Spain, France, or there's a couple of teams that are clearly very, very good. England can be good in a stretch.
Netherlands are going to be good. Spain's going to be good.
The Blue Bloods are bound to be pretty good and all there. The question becomes, what team or two makes the run into the quarterfinals, semifinals? Who's the Morocco team? Who's the Belgium team? Who's the Bulgaria 94?
Croatia of 18.
Someone's going to fill in that, because I do think it's going to be Spain, France, Argentina, and somebody.
Yeah.
Can you get yourself into a position where you make an unlikely run and be somebody?
That's the hope. Yeah, and I think that will set the tone for the next cycle as well too. Because Poch will ultimately leave and probably end up back in the Premier League, and then we're gonna get the next coach, which is probably going to be MLS or former player, one of those two. And then
that'll happen this August. We'll be having a different coach right after. Yeah,
sure. And then it's preparation for the 2028 Copa America, which will probably be here in the United States. And then, we'll have that 2-year bounce until we get to that next major tournament, which is going to be mid-cycle. So then we have, we'll have the Nations League the following season, the following year. And then, we'll have those steps all the way till 2030 again. And then we'll have something positive off the back end that we'll have something to look forward to 2030.
Because I really thought that this generation of players was going to be special. If they come out and do it, they can regain some of that momentum and a little bit of that shine that they had after 2022. After 2022, that was such a great opportunity. It just felt like, here we go, Copa America, Nations League, couple Gold Cups. It's a great job, good core of players, young players in the pipeline, and it's just been tripping over their own feet.
Well, what I will say is that 2030 cycle looks pretty good, though, considering what we have in Major League Soccer right now. Right? When you think of
there's a lot of good young players. And
when you
a lot of those players will end up overseas. But I think a lot of players are the Landon Donovan, Christian Roldan model is not terrible. If you can play with one club and be an anchor player and lead it to trophies and develop yourself, you can have a good career.
I would agree.
So we'll see how that plays out. I want to believe that we will win.
We will. Yeah. We will. We will.
Yeah. So it's going to be fun. I mean, the off the field stuff will fortunately, once they blow a whistle, become the secondary in the news. Yeah, the matches will carry through. I do think that this is a tournament that the group play is so diluted that the tournament doesn't really get interesting till the round of 16.
Yeah. And then with everything that's going on with tickets and everything like that.
The off the field mess that is this tournament is a separate conversation.
Sure.
We have to hope the football salvages the football.
I would agree.
But this has a tendency, I do think, from the round of 16 in, with the teams like Spain and whatnot, and a couple of surprise teams we'll see. We've seen Japan be interesting lately. Somebody's going to be that spark team that comes in. It'll be interesting to see who that team is. Will Mexico be very good getting all of those games at home first and go on a run? That would be fascinating.
Mexico is going to be an interesting one too, because they're playing all that. It looks like they're going to be playing most of their difficulty in Mexico, and I wouldn't bet against Mexico in Mexico.
Not at all. No.
And I'm not a big fan of this.
I think they could be a quarterfinalist.
And I think this is the worst Mexican national team I've seen in 30 years. But that being said, Mexico is special. They seem to play special at home.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us, Jeff. I want to say thank you very much for joining me tonight. It's always fun. Like, the reason why I like talking to you is because we go back 40 years with the national team. And, it's fun talking to somebody that actually remembers and actually understands.
My first national team game, and this will age me a lot, was a Argentina 78 qualifier in the Kingdom between the U.S. and Canada. And there were Seattle Sounders on both teams. The goalie for Canada at the end of 76 at that game was Tony Chersky.
By the way, how was Canada?
And what?
Yeah, Boris Bandov, yeah.
We had Boris Bandov and David D'Erico were both Sounders playing for the U.S., and it was a qualifier, and it led to me like gritting out my, I'm 8-9 years old, and I got out my Guinness book to look up what this even was. What is this World Cup?
Right.
That's how the Sounders of that era had Sir Jeff Hurst. So you start looking, what is a World Cup hat trick? You're 8-9 years old. It stays with you.
My first game was November of '89. As a matter of fact, it was the $1 billion goal. I remember watching it on ESPN. JP Della Camera on the call, live from Trinidad, and I remember watching it, thinking to myself, "What is this?" Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, okay, cool. It's the U.S. Cool, because I was always a big fan of the U.S. in sports.
Yep.
So I was like, oh, this is great. This is great. And I remember watching Italia 90. And that's essentially when I became a US fan. So yeah, I mean, I go back to the late 80s. So,
Yeah,
but
I'm also 58. So,
yeah, yeah.
I'm a little older. But and my parents were season ticket holders in the 70s in the NASL. So we went to when I was a kid. So
Yeah.
I was lucky that way. So we'll see how it goes. But it's always good to have me on.
Yeah.
I would like to talk to you again before the World Cup.
All right.
Around that Senegal game.
Okay.
If that's cool.
Yeah.
Because
yeah,
that is, I think that is our litmus test we're both looking at as being so important right before the tournament. You'll end up doing, because you do a lot of your watch alongs.
Mm-hmm.
Let's right after that Senegal game get together and see how we're feeling. I feel like that sounds like a cool conversation.
You got it.
That's when fan and stuff is getting pretty close to each other. So we'll see.
Yeah, I would agree.
We'll see.
I would agree.
All right.
All right. You got it. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Monday evening. I will be back tomorrow with USMNT Yanks Abroad as we recap the weekend that was for U.S. men's national team pool players in Europe. And it was actually kind of a banger weekend as a couple of our strikers scored over the weekend. So it should be fun recapping that. So I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Tomorrow night I get to see the U.S. women play here in Seattle. So
there it is.
Yeah. So
there it is.
We got a national team week. Man, sorry.
Is what's her is the chick from the New York Gotham?
Rose?
God, she's good. Yeah, Rose. Rose Lavelle. Oh, she's good looking. Ooh, I got a thing for Rose. I got a thing for Rose Lavelle.
Yeah, my brother. But Rose had a nice goal against Japan in the first game of this friendly series. So
okay.
Yeah, it'll be good. We'll have Rose. We'll have Rose and Rodman and. It'll be that's my tomorrow night, and then Wednesday night I've got Sounders and Tigres. It's like it's a rough week for Jeff.
All right, guys, take it easy. Good night.
Bye.
Rusted goalposts under fading skies.